Tuesday, August 8th, 2023. This is the Teaching and Learning Committee meeting for the School District of Waukesha Board of Education. We will start with verification that the meeting's been properly posted.
Yes.
Thank you. And our first item of business is approval of the teaching and learning minutes from the June 6th, 2023 meeting.
I motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Thank you, Mrs. Koenig.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Mr. Borowski. Any questions? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is an opportunity for citizens to speak. We have one speaker tonight, so they will be allowed up to 5 minutes to complete their comments. We will notify you at 3 minutes. We expect our speakers to honor our time limit, refrain from using any inappropriate language, and be respectful in their comments. Speakers who do not meet these expectations may be prohibited from speaking at future board or committee meetings. Speakers are here to address the board, not the audience. The school board and this committee does not endorse any comments made by members of the community here tonight. We'd like to remind our community members of the impact of their words on others and that our children are watching. We commit to communicating with you in respectful and productive ways and ask that you do the same. We also expect that the audience will be respectful of the speaker and of the board and refrain from responding with verbal comments, cheering, applause, or other behavior that will detract from the meeting. Please note that no obstructions can be created between the board and the audience. Visual aids cannot be used, and the area behind the speaker and podium will be clear during public comment. Also, in order to respect our speakers and meeting participants, please silence your cell phones. Our speaker tonight is Paul Reese. Push the
button? It goes, oh, now it's on.
Okay.
All right, automatically goes on, I guess. Well, hopefully this night will go a little better. Anyways, last time I was up here, I talked about debating and how we go about debating and the importance of it. And, you know, there's really two types of debates. There's a political BS debate where lies, damn lies, and statistic comes into cause, and people are just arguing to argue and to win the argument. And then there's an honest debate, one of the things that scientists used to have, where they really try to go up and against each other's ideas and find out where the truth lies in things. And those can also be philosophical as well. But we teach these in school, and there's so little knowledge that a child has when they come up to high school. There's so much more in life you'll learn as you grow older that they really don't know really how to fold together ideas. I remember when I was in high school, we had a debate, and I was given an assignment to debate something that nuclear proliferation in my econ class. And I won the debate, but it was because I lied my way through it. Not lied, but I twisted the truth, and I knew what I was doing. And that's one thing in high school that they never asked what I got out of it. The teacher said, "You'll get stuff out of it. Trust me, Paul. You'll learn by doing this." Yeah, I learned that people don't pay attention and aren't prepared to debate stuff. But it wasn't an honest debate. And last month, or not, back in June also, this board was attacked for its lack of diversity, equity, inclusion. And these are words that are just hollow words that really have no meaning when you examine them. What do they mean? How does that affect education? Where do you see it get better where these things are applied? Because you would have evidence that MPS or someone has improved their education by applying these things. And you don't. But I can go around the world and show you where places where this doesn't come into play, where education is far better than this country. You can go to places like Japan, China, South Korea. These are places where their education is better than ours, and they don't worry about this kind of garbage because they treat people like they are, and they don't have to have hang-ups about who they are. They're different nationality, and they still all can learn math and reading, and their language is a little more complex than ours. So they can do all these things without these things. But also, can the opposite be true? Can people isolate and segregate and still learn as well? Yeah, they can. That would be Israel. Israel is forced to. They educate their kids just fine. And it is unfortunate the way it is, and I only have 2.5 minutes. I could go into this one for a lot longer than that. But people will learn, regardless of their situation, they will learn if they're taught and given the opportunity. And instead, we get sidetracked on this garbage, and it is absolutely garbage. We don't look at what's hurting even our minority students, and it's a lack of families. They have no parents. People will argue, and they will argue these points.
2
Equity,
minutes.
Diversity. They attack this board on it. They'll say that there is not enough diversity in this room, or not in this room, because they'll ignore Markel. They attack you guys because you guys are homeowners, and yet they attacked Markel when he was running for not being a homeowner. They had it both ways. Also, they want to say that they want this equity, they want this appearance of equity, that these appearances matter. Yet when Markel won his seat, he came in third. There is no liberal that voted on him because of his appearance. They voted against him because of his ideas. So even they would admit, philosophically, that ideas do matter. And if your ideas are different than mine, we won't vote for you. But it's not because of the color of his skin that they chose not to vote for him, it's because of his ideas. So they do matter. And so I like the way this board is going, and I hope this board and this administration keeps going the way it is and educates all our kids and gives them all an opportunity to have a good, solid future. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, our next item of business is approval of overnight field trip requests, and we have one tonight. Dr. Siebert?
All right. Well, good evening, everybody. We are fortunate to have 3 representatives here from South High School. I'm going to invite them up. We have Sarah Dude, and we have Marissa Hernandez and Julia Milkey from the cheerleading program at South, who has been invited to the Varsity Cheerleading Nationals in Orlando, February 9th to the 13th, 2024. So congratulations, ladies, and welcome.
Thank you.
You bet. So I think we can basically open it up to questions, unless you'd like the ladies to give a little overview of the trip, Dr. Piasek.
That would be great. We would love to hear details about the trip, and then we might have some other questions for you.
Okay, perfect. So my name is Marissa Hernandez. I am the varsity head coach at Waukesha South for the cheer program. I'm also the president for the Junior Black Shirts Youth Cheer Program, so working closely with both of those age groups. I'm a South alumni, and this is my 4th year as the varsity coach. So we have taken the cheerleaders to nationals in the past, and with the level of talent and really the excitement we're seeing from both our student athletes and their parents, we're looking forward to try and take them again this year. And I'll let them just introduce themselves quick.
Hi, I'm Julia Milkey, and I am currently the head JV coach of our program. I'm also the vice president of our youth program. I am an alumni from Waukesha South. I was part of the cheer program for 8 years as an athlete, and then now this is my 3rd year coaching. So I'm just really excited to be here representing our program and all the progress that we've made.
And I'm Sarah Dude. I'm a counselor at Waukesha South. I used to coach over 10 years within the program, and now that it's growing so much this year, again, helping support that growth and just helping wherever I can.
Great. So a little bit about the competition. There is a qualifying event. So first we would need to make it through the UCA Regional. We are actually hosting that competition at Waukesha South this year on Sunday, December 10th. The reason we're doing that is because we would get a little bit of a stipend to help pay for some of that nationals trip to help cut down some of the costs. So we're really looking forward to doing that. We would be going in the non-building division, which is essentially a tumbling routine, which is what our team is really great and where their talent lies truly. But they still do the traditional type of cheer routine that you would kind of see at games as well. So we would be taking approximately 12, maybe up to 15 athletes, but we're shooting for 12. We do have the current varsity team now, but we would be holding another tryout if this were to be approved to try and see if there's any more interest and to really finalize that team. So the dates for the trip would be the 9th through the 13th, and they compete on Sunday and that Monday. So those are our competition days. You want to jump in and say anything else?
No, I just think it's been great success over the past, I think it's been 8 years now that they placed top 3 at the state level. The program has built, and these ladies have done an amazing job the last few years too. So the last 4 years, they've won co-ed state championships with tumbling again being that primary focus and done a really good job. So I feel like this is the year where our seniors are really ready to go, and our freshmen coming up are really talented too. So this is going to be a fun year to go for the qualifying event and hopefully qualify for nationals.
It's been really exciting to watch your program. You've made South proud, obviously, and the district proud. It's just such a neat group of kids that you have, I should say young adults. And we've had them here on a few occasions, so getting to know the team a little bit, and sounds like they've had great success. I do have just a question for administration. Some others might have questions too. This looks a little different from some of the advancement type competitions where we don't require things to come forward if they're qualifying for regional, state, or more advanced competition. How is this different from other athletics?
I would start by saying that the way the board policy reads is that if a trip is less than $250 per student, then it doesn't have to come through this committee. So sometimes the qualifying events may be that low cost threshold, so you don't see it until they make it to the national trip, and then that, of course, costs more because it's traveling out of state usually. So I think that that might be where you're wondering about that. As far as co-curricular trips, we do ask that we get the request to go hopefully a year-ish in advance, but it is a little bit more variable because of, like, they just found out that they can host in December, and so those kinds of things don't allow them to do 12 months in advance. But that is kind of built into the policy to be allowed.
Yeah,
Does that help?
it does. This is a little bit of both, right? There's some of that athletics. I mean, obviously, we recognize your sport as a sanctioned varsity sport, so there's that advancement piece. And then I think given the circumstances, it's unreasonable to have 18 months' notice in a situation like this. So I'm very comfortable with the trip. What other comments or questions does anybody have? Betty?
I just want to make a comment. I was really excited when I read this, and you just highlighted it. When I read the Waukesha South cheerleading program has grown significantly during the past 8 years. You've placed top 3 in state competitions, et cetera. What do you attribute to being a really important factor that has just boosted this program? What are some things that you feel have just made a difference over the last 8 years?
Yeah, I really think for me, before I was a varsity coach, I was the youth programs director before becoming the president for about 7 or 8 years. And I think that investment in the youth program has really helped carry us through, because starting with our athletes really young, getting them excited about the sport, getting them knowledgeable with it, by the time they were coming up to high school, they were making varsity teams and were scoring higher at their tryouts than some of the team or the athletes who just walked onto the team. So really our investment in that younger age group is where I think we've seen the most growth. And obviously keeping our alumni in as coaches and kind of keeping them come back to really keep our culture strong and true, it's led us to be very successful.
I also think that the athletes loving it as much as they do and having such great success, they keep getting more to join and to recruit each other. So they have been an amazing recruitment tool for us as well.
Mr. Borowski?
Yes, I was just curious on the budget side, 25% paid by site funds. Is that just Waukesha South, or what goes into that?
So combination, if they are to qualify, there is some support that we're able to get from the district, so that's part of it. We also, with our huge cheer competition that we host a separate one every year called Southside Showdown. Those funds, we try to make it as affordable for every athlete as possible. We do a lot of fundraising through that. It goes to their individual accounts that we hold ourselves, and then that money then will be less to go to those events too. So we figure it's probably around 25% that will get covered that they don't have to worry about paying for the trip.
And I'd just like to congratulate you on your progress as a long-term cheer parent of 2 daughters. I remember the years that South was not very good with the youth program in high school, and it's really, I mean, it's probably the best of the 3 high schools now. So congratulations, it's great progress.
Thank you.
All right, so we'd be looking for a motion to approve the field trip request.
I'll move.
Thank you.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Koenig. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. All right, passes 5-0. Fun.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We really appreciate the opportunity.
All right. The next exciting topic on our agenda tonight is the Hadfield Achievement Gap Reduction Grant update. I see our principal
right.
coming forward.
Yes. All right, welcome, Mike and Brandy.
Hi.
Thank you for being here. So this presentation is part of a requirement of being in the AGR, Achievement Gap Reduction Program, which Hadfield is, twice a year, report outs to the board. And so Mike and Brandy, as co-principals, are here to do that for you this evening, so welcome.
Would you like me to put it up? Or,
If you could just project it, and then we'll probably bounce through it a little bit, because there were some good ones in there. While she's doing that, and the committee had an opportunity to watch a video that Ms. Hart recorded for us before the meeting. That's on the Teaching and Learning Committee YouTube channel and can be accessed through board docs if anybody wants to watch that. But was really nicely detailed into the steps that are being taken, the progress that's being made. There's a lot of really good progress being made. So why don't we see if there's any specific questions to get us started? Otherwise, I will kick us off with a couple. Mrs. Koenig.
I just want to say that it is clearly obvious how proud you are of the achievement you've had. Your enthusiasm just came through in the video, and I was excited just watching how excited you were, and it was, evidence through the data you shared. But it's obvious how proud you are, and you should be. It was really exciting to watch that video.
thank you.
Randy, could you give us a little bit of just history on the movement of the AGR grant from Whittier to Hadfield and the number of students that, kind of the strategies and the benefit to that?
So about, how long was I at Whittier? 3 years, so 4 years ago, when I moved into Whittier, the AGR grant was being used for just small class sizes. That was the first strategy that was used at Whittier. And, with the help of, colleagues like Melissa Yao, we were able to look at that and say, like, are we using this grant in the best way? We did some research on what other schools that are seeing success were using, and it was a combination of all of the strategies. And so slowly we've been doing that. And I would say this last year at Hadfield was the first year where we have been able to use a combination of all three strategies. And I think that is, we're onto something a little bit, and we need to kind of keep that going. But so over the years, it was just small class sizes, and then it was a little bit of small class sizes with a little coaching, and now it is all three strategies, which is a small class sizes in certain grade levels that of our most concern, as well as some coaching for the teachers to help support them, and then also tutoring and some pretty intense intervention for students that really need it so that we can close the achievement gap.
And one thing we're really excited about this year is we do have one AGR teacher that's helping us make a smaller class size in second grade, but the other teachers, we're really going to wait until we see the data of the students coming back, and then we're able to move them to where the needs are. Like we're not just going to guess, try kindergarten, try first grade. We're going to be able to move them to where the exact needs are and co-teach with teachers. So we're pretty excited about that.
Especially with the transient population, we need to see the new students that are coming through our doors and support them as needed.
There was one, maybe just start with slide 4, where you had kind of graphics on all the different things that are, way back at the beginning. Probably not the one you thought I would pick, but it caught my attention. There's a lot of things. Mm-hmm. And some of those things have been there for a while. Some of those things are new. The benchmark and the bridges were things that teachers are learning for the first time this last year. The phonics is part of benchmark, right? Those
Yes.
are all under the same logo.
Phonics and writing are both benchmark, you're right.
Yeah, so when I look at that and see all the things, obviously there's been, like, it's kind of an all hands on deck, right? Getting acclimated to new resources, new building, all those new things. And what I appreciated in your presentation was, I think you mentioned that it felt, when we got to the end of the year, that it felt like we are Hadfield and people had kind of engaged in those things. What was the year like? Maybe setting aside the measurements for a second, but just be honest.
Go for it, Mike.
Well, I'll kind of use tonight as an example, because, so last year at about this time, we had a staff picnic. We had our first, like, company picnic, we called it. And everybody kind of got there, and we were all kind of looking at each other, and it was a little awkward to start with, and we started getting along. And then as we got into school, it was kind of like drinking out of a fire hose for September, October, November. Things came at us. We had new kids, we had new, then things kind of calmed down a little bit. And then flash forward to tonight, where we just got back from our staff picnic, and we're all kind of just one. Everybody knows each other, we're joking around, we're having fun. So you look at it that way, and I mean, Brandy can get more specifics, but it was kind of like this kind of year, and we ended on a high, and I feel like we're starting on a high. I'm very excited about September 5th and the kids coming back. Really, we know each other, we know their families, we know the kids, we know our staff's families, we know our ins and outs, we know how to work together. I'm very excited about that.
I would just add that to start the school year was really hard. Like, we're just going to be very honest, right? It was hard. But all of that hard coming together made us, I think, a lot stronger. I feel like personally, my own like personal reflection, I think I grew as a leader because of the hard at the beginning of the school year, and knowing that like we have all these gears, we just got to get them to work together. And I think we finally felt that at probably around, I don't know, maybe January, December, January, we finally started to see all the work that we were doing in September, October paying off, like all of those extra meetings with families, all of those extra coachings with certain kids, or setting aside plans for kids to be successful in classrooms, whether it be academic success, emotional, social success. Like, kids needed different things all over the map. And once we were able to figure that out, I feel like the gears started to work together. I would speak for a lot of the staff members and say that it was a hard year, but everyone felt proud leaving. We did a June celebration with the whole staff, the teaching staff at the end of the year, and there were some really great celebrations where we were, I mean, legitimately so excited and happy for each other. And I think if we can start the school year off of that, we're moving in the right direction.
And I would just like to say, I appreciate you supporting the two-principal model. Personally, she talked about growth as a leader. When you think about just, I think I figured out the other day, we have like 100 IEPs that we have to LEA for. Now, to try to do that alone, that's 100 meetings throughout the year that you're trying to fit in before or after school. Just that alone is overwhelming. But just the ability to be able to bounce things off of one another, work with a really difficult family while Brandy was doing something else, or vice versa, or even look at the lunch hour. Like, I love to be outside with the kids, so I'm outside every day. Brandy loves to be inside and doing inside things. One of the coolest strategies we did was we started a recess, like, reteaching club. And so when kids hurt somebody outside with their hands or their words, they would go to Brandy or somebody else inside, and they would learn how to play a board game together, it wasn't like a detention punishment thing, but it was play a board game together, play Uno, play whatever. And I think we had like 40 students that were initially in that program, and I think we had 1 or 2 repeat offenders. Mm-hmm. So it worked, and we were able to do that because we have 2 people. So I was outside playing football and keeping kids from jumping on each other and diving and fighting about dropping the ball, and she was inside. So it kind of works really well together. And I sincerely appreciate that as a leader, because one of us alone would have burned out last year. It would have, like, legit would have been like, there were days where we were tired and there were 2 of us. So I appreciate you supporting that.
I've personally seen the energy from both of you, and even when you are tired, it doesn't seem like it, but we don't take that for granted, so that is appreciated. I think we want to get into some of the outcomes because they're fantastic. But I don't want to be the only one talking. Did you guys have any specific questions? Why don't we just kind of take reading and then math? And I appreciated the detail that you had, like student example samples. It might take a while to go through all of that, but we could just maybe hit the highlights as far as the outcomes and then talk a little bit about strategies to continue.
Okay. So the first one on your screen now is running record data. That is a data point that we share for kindergarten, first and second grade. So you can see the baseline data that we used and we presented to you guys early on in the school year and then towards the end of the school year. So according to this, kindergarten and first grade met our end of year goals. First grade, let's just take a pause and look at first grade because we are incredibly proud of the work that went into first grade with the first grade teachers, intervention, coaches. There was a lot of wraparound around this particular grade on purpose, right? We want to set the foundation really strong to set them onto those higher grade levels. Anything I'm missing?
No, I would just, when I saw the first grade results and even the second grade results, knowing that we had a lot of students move in and out in that grade, I know we didn't meet it by 4%, but wow, it's good growth just internally when you're looking at that. I'm really excited about that first grade group of kids.
Keep going. Okay, so I'm going to skip over this part. This is kindergarten data in terms of letter and sound assessment. Obviously, the foundation of readers is to know our sounds. We can put together those sounds to read words. Huge growth. You can just look and see that ending the school year, approximately every child knew about 25 of those letter sounds, setting them up for great success in writing and reading. Writing, this is what we shared out in February of beginning to mid-year. I shared in the video a couple of just real life examples that we saw budding up around the school. These were just two, but there were so many. Kids writing their own comic books, kids publishing their own newsletters and their own just write back to me kind of letters, using writing at their home, and then we see that coming back into school was just amazing. This was one specific kindergarten example that was shared in the video. This was this child's beginning of the year writing, so you can see probably very little, letter to sound. She drew a great picture. Moving to the middle of the school, you can see detail within her picture and her writing. If you look, there's not a great spacing yet, but you can definitely see her sentence. I see a unicorn eating lollipops, which is a fabulous sentence, matching her picture. But then at the end of the year, what she turned in was just amazing, was a 3-page book that she wrote about going to pick out a pretty dress. And you can see her pictures match her words. There's spacing, there's capitals, there's punctuation. She says, one day I went to Goodwill and found a pretty dress. You can see her aunt's expression because that dress is $100 and her aunt wasn't so excited about that. Her middle part of her book, and then it wouldn't fit. So now she's the sad one in her picture. So everything matches, which is what we want in writers, early writers. And then the end of the book is, and then my aunt told me to take off the dress. So she's very sad because she had to take it off. But that is accomplished in 1 year of the benchmark writing, which is so exciting to see. Now she's going to first grade with this knowledge, which is awesome. So we can't wait to get into writing this school year. I'm just going to keep going until you tell me to stop. Good? Okay. This is reading map data. So map is going to be replaced with FastBridge and iReady this coming school year. So this is the last map data that we'll really probably be presenting to you guys. We have one of our grade levels in this form that has met the end of the year goals. Based off of percentages, we did see great growth, and we're not going to go through all those individual growth, but even though it might not look like end of year made a lot of progress, we still did. Like there was exceptional growth moving kids from, example, the 9th percentile to the 27th, and you don't see that when you're using the 50th as your only benchmark. Are you good? Okay. Moving into math, you can see MAP data again. Kindergarten and through third is represented in this slide. Third grade is the only grade level that met, although again, we saw great growth in our math learners. There's another form of data that's also in this presentation that will show that is, a different data point, but also shows some great growth in math. Your fourth and fifth graders, fourth grade also met their end of year mark for math MAP data, but fifth grade did not. I'm going to skip this intervention data, although this is an example of an intensive one-on-one 20-week program, working with a first grade reader who started the year at a level 1 and ended the school year at a level 20, which has caught this reader up, actually made them above grade level to start out in second grade. And I'm going to skip those, but this is that math data that I also said was a different touch point. This is the Bridges, this is our program data. This was an assessment given to all students at the beginning of the school year and also at the end of the school year. You can see in the fall, most all of our kids, 91% of them, were in intensive or strategic, meaning they were nowhere near grade level in terms of that assessment. And then at the end of the school year, that same assessment on things that we've taught within the program, followed by a guaranteed and viable sequence of learning that we moved them up to 60-ish% in the meeting and approaching, and only 14% of kids were still in that intensive area, which we were incredibly proud of for math progress for last year.
Randy, if I understand this chart correctly, in the beginning of the school year, less than 10% of your students were approaching or meeting grade level
Correct.
expectations.
Yes.
At the end of the school year, 63% of your students were approaching or meeting.
Correct.
Yeah, and the one thing
incredible.
different about this test than MAPS is this one can be given in smaller segments, and it's paper and pencil. And what happens sometimes with MAPS is it becomes a perseverance or a grit kind of test, and the kids will just check out of it's hard. I don't know how much, I'm not a very good digital reader at all. And some of our kids struggle on a device taking a long test like that. This was more what they were used to in class. So that
They
was,
can move around questions if there's something they want to bypass and then come
yeah,
back.
and then go back to it. And
Yep.
it was the exact same test at the beginning and the end of the year though, so.
But I
Well,
will
same
say,
type of
in the very
questions.
beginning of the school year, you can see the frustration that this
Oh, yeah,
test
kids were
caused.
just thrown.
And then you could see the pride when
Yeah.
they took it at the end of the school year, I did that.
Yeah.
And that was pretty awesome.
Yeah, there were a
Just
lot
the
of.
confidence.
A lot of children were upset when we first gave it to them at the beginning of the year because
Okay.
it was end of the year benchmark. It was hard. And they hadn't really even seen it. And then they fought through it really well.
So based on what you're saying there, that 9% is partially reflective of the format of the test being different than things that they're accustomed to?
No, this one was paper and pencil, so they were used to it,
Okay.
so. But the 9%, that was so they were given the fifth grade standard, let's say, at the beginning of the year, and then given the same standard at the end of the year. Different questions, same
Understood.
standards.
Okay, yeah, I understood. Any questions, comments? Mr. Zenobia?
So, I think I asked something like this the last time we went over the AGR, but in the areas that you see with growth and how you measure that, can you speak a little bit to what you're seeing in that area versus some of the areas that, where our goal was set, but the kids didn't meet? And I understand it was a very chaotic year. And so I know going into this next year, we have new things in place, and it's going to be a much more streamlined year, I think, is what it sounds like. But just knowing the kids and what they've gone through and seeing them grow in areas versus, like we were just talking, test scores and things. Can you tell us a little bit about how
Can I
that's
just clarify
improving?
Can I just clarify what you're asking?
Yes.
The growth we saw, that's not represented. Is that what you're asking?
No, I'm just saying, I know some of the slides you're talking about that there, okay? But to differentiate from, say, test scores versus now we're just looking at the individual students and how they're progressing in learning and what you're trying to get across. So,
I think we could talk about test scores and growth too, but the actual child and the confidence that a child feels, once they start to feel a large sense of belonging, that's when they can open up and actually start learning. And that's what we saw. In September and October, I don't know how many percentages of our students, but I would say high 60% of kids were like not sure. Like, do I fit here? Who do I fit? We had students saying they were from one of the schools when they weren't, just so that they would fit in. So we really had to work with all of the kids, all of the staff, all of everyone, and make sure, like, you do belong here. It's a new school, and we're going to learn together, and we're going to figure this out and build up that confidence. Once they have that confidence, like, they are able to open up and learn. But that was challenging in the beginning of the school year.
Which kind of leads us into so we have our 2 areas on our SAIL goal, and one of them is our school culture goal. And we are going to focus very strongly on executive functioning and self-regulated learners. So their morning before school might be absolutely chaotic. Like, they might not get breakfast, they might be rushed out of the car, we're going to have, from the moment that they walk into school, we did this a little bit last year, but this year it's going to be, now that we know each other, it's going to be a very strong focus. Like, how do we regulate, how do we set up our classrooms so that items are organized, so I'm not running around looking for the writing paper, so I know where my materials are. So when you look at that 4th grade group, we have one particular teacher that is like the queen of executive functioning teaching, and the students are extremely organized, and it takes a lot of work on her part. But if we can replicate some of that school-wide, we're going to start to see, because I was a very unorganized, messy kid. And when my teacher asked me to take something out, I had no idea where it was. And I spent 20 minutes trying to find whatever notebook I needed. If we can get that out of the way and also make the kids feel a belonging and a sense of just calmness, that's where you see some of that take off. Some of the students, the individual students that really took off, we spent a lot of time just getting them feeling comfortable inside of a building with 390 people in there.
Mm-hmm.
So
we're like going off of what Mike just shared, but we're targeting both instructional practices and the learning environment together within the school day. So learning and academics is not a different silo as knowing where my things belong, my organization of my classroom, me feeling comfortable going to my classroom, me knowing where to go for certain things. So a lot of our PD is going to be focused on that learning environment, helping everyone know, because clear is super kind, right? We know that, and we want kids to understand that. That's when they start feeling like they understand what's expected of them. And then our coaches will still continue working with our teachers on those academic or those instructional practices as well. So we're going to be targeting both, especially in those newer areas, writing and math.
Ms. Kozlowski.
I'm elated to see your success. I don't think there's words to say how amazing this is in a year time to take what we knew was hard and to see the results that you've done in a year. So I've been through the data. It's just remarkable. I love the pictures. I love seeing the kids' stories. They make my heart smile. It's great. My question for you, in looking at all that you've learned over the last year, what advice, now I'm thinking bigger, I'm thinking outside of Hadfield. How do you do this in discussions with the other elementary schools? How are we talking about being able to see what you've created and built and hard and get the achievement to do what a student? This is incredible.
I think I'd have to think about that one.
well, I mean, I have a hard time talking about ourselves, like I personally have, but one thing that I'm super proud of is the way that we really, from day one, got our families and our staff to be a part of the school. So one thing we do, I don't know if you know this, but we're doing it next week. We go to every single house on a night. We knock on their door. We hand them a welcome backpack. We make sure that they know they're loved. Here's when open house is. We make a point of doing that every year. We also have multiple welcome coming to the school and just kind of non-threatening ways of doing, like approaching with parents. I think that helps a lot. And then with our staff, we really, through small conversations with us and through each other, we really try to build that culture. And when somebody's having a hard day, we tend to see it and we're like, take a break. Can I take over for you? Can we, like you'll see Brandy and I on the floor in the classrooms all the time. That's really how we built this. In my mind was small moments, 5 minutes at a time, but really connecting with families. Like I can't stress that enough. Us going to see where our families live, seeing them in their space, really helps them feel comfortable. Add more to that.
I mean, I agree with that. I think it all comes down to relationships. Everyone wants to feel a part of something. And I think that every single staff member that we had really did that. They made families feel important. They genuinely love them. We genuinely love our families. The people that we work with every single day, the teachers that we work with, they're working really hard. We see it. We make sure they know we see it. Everyone has hard days. Knowing that you can tap out with anyone around you, it's just, it feels better when everyone is in it. And I think that we have great people. I think it's your people. It's your people. It's the relationships you build. I agree with the family aspect 100%.
And I think, too, we kind of got this going towards the spring, and we're going to start out stronger with it. We have regular meetings with our support team. So it's Brandy, myself, our school psych, school social worker, and we have regular meetings where we talk about, like, what's bubbling up, what's the hot issue, it's not necessarily always 25% of our kids are having this many discipline problems, but like when the whole lunch recess thing came up, we're like, our students who have never been in school because of COVID and whatever reason don't know how to function in a lunchroom right now. What can we do differently? Our teachers are like, well, let's have meat in the classroom so they eat more, and then we'll go outside and we'll play, and let's get them to learn. So it's thinking of those types of things and having regular meetings and discussions about that. And we have a really good support team as well with a lot of really good adults that have remarkable things. And we're not afraid to tell each other, you're wrong, or we should try something different. And I mean, she's laughing because Brandy's very honest and I'm working on that, but like we do function pretty well. Like we'll go at it behind closed doors as our team, but then when we leave, we're Hatfield and we're the Hedgehogs and we're ready to go. So
That's great. I just wanted to commend you. This was pretty exciting to see.
Thank you.
And I just want to add, your style of administrating is what has made the difference. I mean, I can tell you're visible, you're hands-on, you're enthusiastic, and I think that also plays a huge part of the success that you had this year. So make sure that you both pat yourselves and each other on the back. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about what this improvement in academics has done overall within the school when it comes to behavior. Have you noticed as the year went on? Tell me a little bit about behavior issues. Did you notice an improvement as kids were getting more confident in their learning? And did you start to kind of notice, behaviors dropping?
a tremendous amount. I mean, one thing that Brandy brought over from Whittier, and I thought she was nuts at first, was we track radio calls throughout the day. So I need help in room, whatever. I'm like, are you kidding me? She's like, just do it. We'll do it. It'll work. So we went along, we did it, and we looked at it, and as the spring went in, our numbers went way down. Students were learning more, students were more in class, they were not leaving class. There were days where we had 35, 40 radio calls when this first came together. And in the spring, we had days with 9, 8, just your typical type of things. But
That's
you're right,
interesting.
as they learned more and got more engaged and felt more belonging, I felt they did better.
Yeah, it's a confidence thing too. I can do it in here instead of my first strategy or maybe my only strategy just to flee, get out of here. It's too hard or I can't do it. So as people built some confidence or a plan to help them know what do I do when I feel that I can't feeling. So it goes to all the plans that were set up for individual students too, to help them know what are my other strategies, because leaving is not the only one. So once that started to click, yes.
I didn't believe that was the case, I just wanted to hear it.
And our teachers, our aides, our custodian, they're remarkable people. And if you've ever met Lori Roth, our secretary, she's kind of like the mom of the school. I mean, we have remarkable people that just come every day for children. And, I mean, we are so thankful that we have the people we have. And we've been able to hire, some people have left, we've been able to hire good people. It's nice to see.
Well, thank you. We appreciate your and your staff's hard work, and we're excited for the next school year and hope you get a little bit of rest before all that happens. But thanks for being here tonight and giving us some great updates.
You're welcome anytime, just stop
Yep,
in.
come on over.
You won't find us in our office, but
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up on the agenda is approval of the 3-year library plan. Ms. Skinner?
That's a tough act to follow.
I know.
But I will do my best. So Milena is here. She's one of our library media specialists. It seems like a while ago, but it was in June that we were at the Teaching and Learning Committee meeting talking about really the work that we had done as a group, and then the input that we gathered, and really to bring forward a 3-year library plan. As we said at that time, it's meant to be a rolling 3-year plan, so we'd always be adjusting as every year continues. So I just wanted to kind of kick it off, but then open it up for more conversation or any questions, and Milena can come on up if there's something that's more specific.
Does anyone want to get us started? I know we've had a little bit of time to digest all of it. Mr. Zenobia?
So, in reviewing this in June and taking another look at it, I think the library plan looks great. I don't have any issue with how it's put together and the goal of it. I do have a concern with what, the board has been looking into for the past couple of years, is how do we deal with books coming into the district that we don't necessarily want. How do we review things? How do we, what structure do we have in place that assures that these types of materials will get even a first look, if not a second? So that's not in the plan. And I know these things have been dealt with at the top of administration, and there's been some change there. So tonight, going forward, how do we put in place measures that will assure that we have a strategy for dealing with the types of books our vendors send us, for instance? So that's my concern. It's been my concern with the library in general, not necessarily those that are there, but with what we purchase. And I know we've been reviewing that over the past few months. And having a closer look at that, but if approval for a 3-year plan is what is desired, then I would like to know there's some strategy to tackle that area of the libraries. So.
Sure, I can speak to it, and other people can too as well. So I know as this was kind of more Jody's area, as we worked with the library, I worked with the library media specialist primarily like with the strategic planning and that sort of thing. She took on and partnered with many of you around that financial piece. And I think there was a time where every year or every month she was reporting out exactly what titles and looking at them, having conversations with all the library media specialists.
So I want to make sure that we're all going on the same path. So my understanding of the library media plan was this was much more of the digital pieces to this. This is not the plan that was outlining the selection of hard copy books that are entwined with our curricular programs.
Correct. We had selected 3 areas of all the areas to focus on, one being the collaborative leadership. Kind of talk like what Brandy and Mike talked about, that collaborative leadership, some of those foundational pieces we didn't feel we have there yet. The other being the area of budget and identifying specific replacement plan, strengthening our review process of what materials we are purchasing with the digital aspect, and then also increasing our Spanish text to make sure we're meeting all learners. And the other area was curriculum instruction and assessment. And what you'll see there is a lot of partnering with those collaborative partners around making sure that we're using those library resources. I think behind the scenes, what we had in place was to review what was being purchased, and that came through to the school board here at Teaching and Learning. And I'm looking at you, Carrie, because I believe that became a once in a while kind of monitoring piece, and we can talk about just our ideas like moving forward.
Yeah, so I just want to clarify, because there's a difference between the process that we're doing to bring textbooks and other textbooks into the library and the book reviews and whether or not they are aligned with a curriculum versus not aligned with the curriculum versus the app devices that instruction is used, or specific apps, I think PebbleGo, Britannica, right? And then the online media computer that we have. So I don't think that this library plan is aligning with how are we buying books, how are we preventing them from not coming in. It's the resources that are allowed on their media devices, I believe was more in line with where this 3-year plan was going, in collaboration with the technology department, with curricular, right? And those are still approved, right? Every time when we want to get an app or something that we think is in support of learning, it goes through a review process and an approval process that we have
Yes.
touched base on. Okay.
Mr. Zenobia.
I would just reiterate, I don't have any issue with the plan itself and what we've been talking about on the digital side. Understanding that this is the focus. However, unless we can expect another 3-year plan that deals with something else, that would be different, but that's not my understanding of whether or not we would see that. And it hadn't been my understanding that we would have a plan like that going forward. It was always discussion. So I feel it's a good point to bring this topic up, because over the course of the last 2 years, we have asked for a number of things in this area that, and while we've made a ton of progress, there's still a lot of subjectivity in the process. And so that's my biggest concern. And I'm not convinced that things on the curricular side won't enter into that either. I don't think just because we're talking about what students will be using digitally for the curriculum isn't going to contain some of the concerns that we've had. Now, it's not my primary focus. It is having a plan in place that speaks to the libraries in general that, to me, isn't address some of the concerns that I've had. So that's really the spot that I wanted to bring it up.
Melina, please have a seat. Yeah, join us. And I'm going to make a comment, and then it sounds like you want to respond a little bit too. I think what we're looking at here is a statutory requirement to have a plan to integrate our library resources with our teaching and learning strategies. And that's really important, right? And I think sometimes we get caught up in occasionally something happens that we don't have under control. But arguably, you know, the library is a place of learning, and there's thousands and thousands and thousands of resources that we want our kids to be able to use, to find, to have a positive experience with. Where do I go for these resources? And so when I look at alignment with curriculum instruction and assessment, you know, there are always going to be opportunities for kids to go find something that aligns to their interest or the subject matter or the topic that's being taught. And so that's how I see this plan is, let's make sure we have the best possible resources. Let's make sure everybody has the ability to use them. Let's understand families that might not have the digital access that others do, that we provide whatever resources we can. So this is about making things accessible in a positive way. And what I'm hearing, and some of the concerns that I think they're not unique to our district, right, is what happens occasionally, which is somebody might have access to something that just doesn't align to the curricular standards or to the age appropriateness. And I feel like we have other processes to kind of manage that. I'm going to let Melina speak, because when I'm thinking about what we're approving here today, this is about the infrastructure to support learning, utilizing all the resources that we have, and not about some of those stage gates, if you will, to monitor the appropriateness of those materials.
The one thing I heard, and I'll just clarify, I hear the word digital thrown out a lot, and I want to clarify that this does not just mean what we provide digitally to the kids. This also talks about what we physically have in the buildings in terms of books for kids, because this encompasses our entire budget. And so this is where the connection with the curriculum area is very important. We're making sure that the nonfiction we're buying supports what they're learning in their classroom, or supports the interest of the students that we're hearing. You know, they're coming and requesting, they have a project to do, and they want to do a project about this. And so we want to say that we're supporting that both digitally and with physical materials as well. So I just want to clarify that, because I don't want you to walk away thinking that this library plan is a digital plan. It is not. It is everything we buy. And in fact, one of the most important parts of that plan talks about the equipment that's used in the library. Initially, we focused on the equipment that was being used by the staff in the library. But if you look beyond the first couple of years, we're talking about what we will provide equipment-wise in terms of students as well. So are they going to need lookup stations? Do we need to purchase things that our aides can use to help teach about library skills, things like that? So I just want to make that clear. The other thing is, as with most strategic planning, it's a look from 10,000 feet, right? That's what the state is requiring from us, is a big picture, right? And so that's what this plan is. And we have other policies in place that have just recently, as you mentioned, Mr. Zenobia, in the last couple of years, have been revisited. And if we need to revisit them again, that's the place where we get into the nitty-gritty details. And I think that that would be helpful for all of us to be able to hear, because basically, and I'm only speaking for myself, I can only speak for myself, I think, but we know pretty much what you don't want. And so if we need to do something with our selection policy, which is part of our board policies, Mr. Siebert and I just this week had a conversation about, well, what are we going to do moving forward? Are there going to be any changes to our purchasing procedures to ensure what you're talking about? And so I think that is ahead of us, because we have new people coming in. You may have more specific suggestions for that. And, you know, being more specific can never be bad, right? So that's what I would say about those things. I hope that clarifies.
It does for me. Thank you. I'm not against moving forward the approval of what you're doing as a strategy and what we need to do to be in compliance. And I do appreciate what you just said as far as going through the past 2 years and looking at, what we're trying to prevent from happening. So I do appreciate that. I think with some recent changes that's going to look different. And so my question going forward, my request going forward would be, how do we manage that? And so there's got to be a process, and there has been some things put in place that the public can see, that are transparent. And I think that's also part of what is important going forward, is having people be able to understand the process that their kids are involved in, that they can help manage that too. So that's where I'm coming from on all this. But again, I'm not against where we're at on this particular part of the approval. I think it's very important that we align our curriculum with the resources we have. So thank you.
Anything else? Maybe just one strategic question, because I saw part of the process was just narrowing it down to what the top priority areas were for us. And I tend to agree that collaboration, the classroom level, library level collaboration, obviously budget and resources, and then curriculum and assessment integration. But there were a number of other pieces to the pie, which kind of stood out to me: use of space and time, infrastructure, personalized professional learning, data privacy. So there are other areas. Do you envision that those are areas that get tackled down the road, since this is kind of a living document, or are these three areas in critical need of attention, and that kind of they become our three guiding principles for the foreseeable future?
I can take this. We, as a team, had a lot of conversation about just that. When we look at the wedge around robust infrastructure, we kind of looked at each other like, really? We all really like Steve Schloman, and we want him to do that, right? And so we said as a group, we can help and support, but that's really technology and, that area to address that. But they have this part that, they would help guide us in. The other area, data and privacy. In my former role, that's really what I had said. I've been working around the data and assessment pieces and the privacy of that. So I've been working with principals around those pieces already. So we kind of tried to separate some out that, yes, we need support of the library media specialists in that program, but it's not all on them. We had a lot of conversation around time and place, because we felt, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? And do we create the time and the space, or do we first get these collaborative leadership pieces and structures in place? And I think where we ended was that if we have these collaborative leadership structures, we're using the financial resources really well and embedding those resources in the curriculum, that in a sense will create a time and space, for those materials. In the end, we're going to have to review where we're at with all the pieces, but that's just, we kind of grappled with that at the very beginning of, wait a minute, is it our group to take on all these different pieces? And we just started to separate it, and then these three rose to the top.
And I would say, I've had experiences in other districts and in smaller districts, and we're very fortunate here in Waukesha, being a large district. We have a lot of people to help do these things. I know folks in smaller districts where the library media specialist is the instructional technology person. So that's why it's included in library plans, because really a district this size is not the norm, right, in our state. Most of our districts are much smaller. So all those pieces are part of that plan, but we're relying on our partnership with the instructional technology team to support that as we can, but we're lucky to have them there to do the heavy lifting, so to speak.
Thank you. We are very fortunate. We have beautiful, extensive libraries and a whole lot of technology to lean on, so I think that's great for our students.
The one thing I would highlight too is that with that collaborative leadership, it also means the library media specialist group, they are collaborating more than ever. And so we don't want one school to have 5 lookup stations on the sparkly new blue Mac or something like that. And they have 5 lessons of how to use this and that, where another school maybe doesn't. And so the team themselves is collaborating way more than they have to organize everything so that we can move forward together.
Makes sense. Any other questions? This is an action item, so we'd be looking for an approval of the 3-year library plan.
So move.
Thank you. Mr. Borowski?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Koenig. Any further comments?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Ms. Kozlowski.
So I'm reading through the strategic plan, and, you know, I agree with Mr. Zenobia that and I agree that a 10,000-foot plan, but over the course of the 3 years, the strategy and the actions are all digitally related. And so if we are scoping that this is an all-encompassing, I'm looking at it, it's a device replacement plan, it's looking at it and partnering with the technology department. Parts of where we take a look at history is that technology used to have the library media specialist report through them, right? And so the gap that we lost is who approves what and making sure that the approvals are tied to the school board's approval of board curriculum, teaching and learning, and making sure that that does not change as, you know, we talk about the heavy lifting as to what they would be doing. It's upon approved execution that is instructed by teaching and learning and the board. But if we're looking 10,000, 30,000, the way that I'm reading this is heavily focused on the digital scope of that and not the overall. I mean, there's still, if that's the piece that we're taking a look at, I think that part of the conversation where I've come is that overall, there's still a tremendous amount of work to do within the actual texts and reviewing what's in the library, what's not. Does this still apply to the curriculum that we're now using? I mean, we've just spent oodles, millions approving curriculum, and now do we have the texts that, I assume there's going to be many texts that we still need to purchase now to support the new curriculum, but then there's also texts that we would have to eliminate, I guess. I don't know if that's the right way, right? So it doesn't support an approved curriculum that we're using. And I don't want to lose sight of that at 30,000 feet, that all-encompassing. And so that's why, and I appreciate the clarification that it's not just media, but that when I'm reading this, the context of what we're doing focuses heavily on the technology side.
Is that a question or a comment?
No, I think we clarified.
Okay.
Right? If it is all-encompassing, that there is still a bigger piece. It's not just the technology piece, which does appear to be some of the heavier strategic stuff that we're looking at over the next couple years. And I do appreciate that this is a living, moving plan, as long as we all agree that the tech side of this is still part of the next 3-year plan.
If I'm understanding your comments correctly, I think it maybe goes back to what Mrs. Gennerman just said about the technology side, right? It didn't make the top 3 cut for the strategic plan because it's a different function within the district, but the overlap between the technology infrastructure and the access to the resources that we have, in particular the digital ones that are kind of front and center in this plan, is really important. It's not just important, it's they're inseparable ultimately. So I guess that means, and we've done it here before, to continue to look at infrastructure and apps. I think there's much improved processes for approving those, for aligning them with curriculum when we approve curriculum. I guess what we haven't seen yet is over time, as the curriculum is in place and the apps kind of come on and off, because they will, what that's going to look like.
Yeah, and I think the instructional tech group was here in spring last year and talked, and they revised their plan as far as how often things are approved. So that should help with that as well.
It's probably even bigger than that in terms of like firewall and other infrastructure type changes that could support or limit ability to access things, but I know we're getting kind of way off, but okay. So we do have a seconded motion. Any other comments? All right. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, passes 5-0. Thank you. It's a lot of work. Thank you. All right. We have 3 policies that we're seeking approval for modifications to those policies tonight. So we are going to start with curriculum development. And Dr. Siebert, you're going to lead us through the policies, right?
Sure. So these are all part of the most recent Neola update. And as you know, there's a board policy where we pass them out to the committees to do the work. We do have another Neola update actually coming September 15th. So we'll have, I think there's 48 new policies in there. So we're not close to done, but we'll keep everything rolling. This one, 2210, is trying to align more closely the curriculum review process or development process with DPI regulations pertaining to curriculum development and content, as well as referencing the review process. It incorporates reference to the innovative design, instructional design concepts, and a cross-reference to an innovation programming. And there's another policy that follows this that ultimately then reflects what would be reflected in this policy. It's really pretty straightforward, I think. It inserts the review process should happen every 5 years. Talks about the sequential organization. Ms. Kozlowski just mentioned the amount of curricular work that we've done over the past few years, so that we're obviously continuing to do that work. And then it's a number of just word changes, essentially, from provides to provide, ensures to ensure, incorporating to incorporate, pieces like that. And the other thing I think that's important to note is that we do have 2 administrative guidelines that reflect the areas that we're talking about here, 2210A, which is curriculum development, and 2210C, assessing the district's learning program. So I feel like together with this new policy, we feel like we are in a good place.
I have maybe just one clarifying question, because I want to make sure that I'm reading it correctly. That first sentence, which is really the most substantive part that's added, that says it provides for evaluation on a continuing basis and shall provide for the review of the evaluation process at least every 5 years. So it's not calling for the review
Of the curriculum.
of the effectiveness of the curriculum. It's just saying that that evaluation process that's used needs to be evaluated every 5 years. But we are evaluating curriculum on an ongoing basis.
Right. And so, yeah, I mean, we have our district curriculum council. We have a number of internal mechanisms that have been developed through the teaching and learning department. So we'll continue to do those. And at any time, I mean, certainly within the 5 years, we'll continue to reflect as that department evolves and changes, what if we need to make any changes to the actual review process.
Any questions or comments? Is there a motion to approve policy 2210 as proposed?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Seconded by Ms. Kozlowski. Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Don't see any. All right, moving on.
All right, moving on to another Neola update, 2220, adoption of courses of study. This one simply is updated to reflect 2210 that you just approved. And it's only updated in the first paragraph, and it just describes that particular policy and that this policy is in alignment with the method of evaluating those that process, and then references the hours of instruction component that's outlined by the DPI, which varies for elementary to middle to high school.
So I think the big addition here may be more administrative in nature, where it reflects the courses of study shall specify the hours of instruction committed to it each week, semester, and school year. Where is that specified?
Each course, so the last sentence. I'd have to almost refer to, Rachel, is that referred to like in the UBDs when we think about how much time we're going to spend on each curricular area? Like per standard, it's designated, I think, within the UBD process.
It's in our course outline.
Course outline.
That's in the last part of the course in BD.
Okay.
So it says hours of instruction committed by week, semester, and school year. So you could think of it in terms of credit hours, but that might not this is not necessarily, well, this is probably necessarily secondary. It just doesn't say secondary. Credit hours.
Yeah, it'll have like duration of the course, so that's like the semester, the year long, and then the course outline. I don't know that we get as specific as hours of instruction, but.
So if we approve this, that would be in policy that
We need to do that.
we would need to do that. And that's per statute, 11801. How many times per week that they're spending, yeah. I mean, it's interesting, if we were to talk about high school schedule, that would be a different conversation. So I think that's something that we just need to understand how to apply.
How to apply it. Sure.
I don't think it would be hard to calculate because again, in our course UBDs, if we put it to semester, we have how many days that is and how many hours of instructional time that would be. So I don't think it's a huge lift.
And for those who maybe weren't in the room, Melissa Yao, who is the elementary director of teaching and learning, had just shared that at the elementary level, they do already do the hours. And so I just wanted to share that with everyone since she's away from a microphone.
What if we just change it to may specify? I mean, is that
I
satisfying?
don't think that's our choice.
I think it's a statutory
Yeah.
requirement. So to Rachel's point, we can make the adjustment at the secondary level.
Okay. Given what's in statute, I'm comfortable with the recommended change because I think we're obligated to that change, but I think if there's any administrative limitations on being able to comply with that, we probably would need to take that up again in September or as soon as possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other questions? All right, would be looking for a motion to approve the modifications proposed to policy 2220 adoption of courses of study.
So moved.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
Moved by Mr. Borowski. I'm making it easy for you guys tonight. All right, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, passes 5-0. Moving right along.
All right, the last policy we have tonight, another update, is 2221 Special Observance Days. What this one is stating is that in compliance with Wisconsin school law, the board directs the superintendent to ensure the following days are appropriately observed in all schools. It adds in September 11th. I can say, in looking at this, in reviewing it a little bit, we aren't currently doing all of these recognitions as statutorily required. I think the best way for us, because we should be doing that, to do it is to prepare some district-wide announcements for each of these days that we would share with all of the levels, to be able to be read like in announcements on a particular day. And then we can also work with principals to maybe update. We don't have a current administrative guideline on this, but I think the other thing we should be thinking about is, are there other things that we celebrate within the district that we want to make sure we do celebrate, or perhaps we don't want to celebrate, that we would articulate in an administrative guideline to accompany this policy.
I think the language that struck me, I hadn't really paid much attention to this policy, but it says are appropriately observed. And that's a big question, like what does that mean?
Right.
Because, you know, if you ask your kids how to appropriately celebrate or observe their birthdays, they're probably all going to come with a very different opinion. And so I had a lot of fun with this one. I learned a whole lot about all these people on the list, especially growing up in public school in Illinois. I didn't know half of these things were even actual days, but I would agree that I think that question, and I was thinking we might want to modify appropriately, but I think if you're looking at an administrative guideline that's kind of obviously age grade level appropriate, things are going to look different. It even occurred to me some of these, you know, we're going to talk about AP government, but there's some really unique ones in here that seem like they would apply in, you know, to a greater extent in certain courses than they would,
Right.
you know, generally speaking. You know, trying to explain the history of Fighting Bob to elementary school kids.
Right,
You know,
right.
great story, but
Yes.
so I think that question of, you know, what does that appropriate observance look like at different age and grade levels would be,
Yes.
you know, nice to have.
My thought was to be compliant with the statute, we would start with the announcement concept, and then we can probably grow into more activities or special observances if over time. But that's where we'll start, and then we'll work on those administrative guidelines as well.
We also thought, just hearing from the principals, like, what are you doing already? And just having them work, again, collaboratively. Like, we don't all have to recreate, you know, reinvent the wheel. But having some time with them to, like, look at all these things that we are celebrating and how we are and what resources we're using would be a good next step, too.
Yeah, and we'll get moving on it because we have 4 of those days in September. So they get hot and heavy right out of the gate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right in. All right. Any questions? All right, I would then be looking for a motion to approve the modifications to policy 2221, special observance days.
So moved.
Thank you. Moved by Mr. Zenobia,
Second.
seconded by Mrs. Koenig. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No, passes 5-0. All right, good work.
Yes, thank
Moving on to social studies.
Are you taking this one? Yeah, I think.
Rachel and Nate are going to come up with their AP US Government. This is a discussion item for tonight, but looking at the course syllabus update.
Fancy, they just go on all by themselves. It's my first time. All right, hi everybody. So I'm here back with Nathan Gevlinger, who is an AP government teacher at Waukesha North. And over the course of the last 4 months, we were in front of you presenting our AP government textbook. And after the recent adoption of that textbook, the team went right to work building what you have in front of you, which is the syllabus for the course. The syllabus is, in fact, aligned directly to the AP course framework. And so we're putting this forward as an information item. The team is planning on coming back in October based on the feedback that you give us tonight for a discussion item, and then in November for action to adopt this as the approved syllabus for the course.
Any questions? Mr. Zenobia?
So I know that the time frame we kind of set up for, as you just mentioned, October, November. Just give us an idea of what of the course will be covered in our next couple of steps here that we're going to look at all this.
Like between now and
Yes.
November, what's going to
Yes.
be covered? So I'll have Nathan take that one. He's got a better idea of the scope and sequence.
Yeah, we'll cover Unit 1 completely, and that deals with foundations of American government, constitutional underpinnings. And then we'll be close to wrapping up Unit 2, which is the 3 branches of government. There are 5 units in total, so we'll be well on our way by middle of November, through just about through Unit 2 and on to civil rights and civil liberties.
And thank you for getting this together so quickly. It's a lot here to look at, but it's great detail, so I appreciate that.
Anyone else? I do just have a clarifying question, and I didn't have an opportunity, nor do you probably want me to do this, but to kind of go back and see how the pages and topics align. It seems like everything is relatively sequential, but I caught a couple points where there may be sections of the textbook that are unused, or I couldn't really figure out, like between pages 80 and 120, between topic 1.8 to 2.1, there wasn't a reference to textual content. So are those just areas that there's supplemental content, or is it skipped over, or am I just way too in the weeds as far as what pages? So I'm looking at topic 1.8, and then I didn't know if, like, are there just pages missing from topic 1.9? And then it goes to 2.1, which jumps straight to page 108. And I don't have the book anymore, so I couldn't clarify, like, what are on those pages.
Yeah, off the top of my head for 1.9 is essentially a wrap-up of looking at the relationship between the state and federal government, and looking at those 2 cases that relate specifically to federalism, which are McCulloch v. Maryland and U.S. v. Lopez. So essentially, to the best of my knowledge, 1.9 is just kind of a wrap-up of what we already covered with 1.7 and 1.8.
So are those, like, I know there's some sample questions and there's other things in the book that are kind of packed in there, so that's probably what's happening there?
Yes.
It very well could be. The team also did look at, again, we talked last time about there were certain pages in the book that were either anecdotal or they were introductions or closures to the book that they felt were narrative in nature that they didn't necessarily need. So you might see some of those omissions in part of this syllabus. But the direct instruction around the pages of the textbook that they're going to explicitly require students to read is what you see in the parentheses.
That makes sense. This is really great to see. It's helpful to kind of move from the textbook itself into what the learning objectives are and how it all flows together. So makes me want to take the class. Probably don't want that either. Other questions? Nope.
So ideally, we do put things in front of you 3 times. I think maybe in between now and October, if the board would feel a readiness to adopt this in October, that might be a discussion. Obviously, they want to get up and running with, like, what's an approved syllabus, as soon as possible. If you need until November, again, we were really anticipating if you had feedback for the team that they would need to, as a team, come back and adjust, using that October to bring you back those changes, and then November for approval. But if in between now and October, as you continue to look at this looks okay, I think that the team would love it if they could come back and, I'm sorry, I meant October, for approval of this.
Mrs. Koenig?
Well, I think just given the amount of time and energy and effort that the team has put into this, I am more than willing to try to make this a priority so that we can possibly, bring this to vote in October, because I feel it would, you're right, you want to be able to move forward, and everyone's worked really hard to do that. So I feel that this should be something that we somewhat prioritize.
Do you feel like there's an advantage in at least getting started with the resources, and then after that first month of school, just coming back, and, because there may be some modifications or tweaks that need to be made? Rachel's nodding her head like she's going to be here.
No, I think that that's fair.
Yeah,
100%.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't just based on my first read-through of all of it, obviously I would think there'd be some lessons learned in implementation, but I don't have any concerns that wouldn't allow me to approve it sooner than later, so. Mrs. Kozlowski?
I would agree. I think that I was very happy with the level of detail that this went into. It was extremely well done for as many of the conversations that we did have on this. I appreciated that. And I do still have the book, so but I would agree.
All right, I'll take my book back home and I'll make sure that I hang on to it. I might actually have a copy at home buried under some windows somewhere. So, very helpful though. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So we'll have you back in October.
Yep.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys.
Thanks, Nathan.
Thank you, Rachel.
All right, we're getting there. So the next item on the agenda is a request for approval of the UBDs for physical education, grades 6 through 8, which we reviewed in June.
So no changes, just again, looking for approval of the 3 syllabi in front of you. And again, we have updated these to include the state mandated health requirements into all 3 of these courses. So looking for approval of these so we can start the year off strong.
Any questions? I do not have any concerns with these. No? Okay.
I motion to approve the middle school physical education syllabi for grades 6, 7, 8 as presented.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Borowski. All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. All right, passes 5-0.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Rachel, and good luck to you. Thank you. I see our couple of high school principals have waited for a long, long time. So the last item on the agenda is a high school GPA update.
Awesome. Thank you, Ryan and Maria, for hanging out tonight with us. So tonight, in the recording, what I had shared is just a continuation around our work around key performance indicators from last year. We really worked a lot around our teaching and learning key performance indicators. We brought forward a timeline for reporting out of each of those areas. Since June was a little busy and then August we didn't have committee meetings, we're now sharing some of the GPA data. And so that's what I have shared, outlined by each class, where we were last spring for each class, as well as winter, and then this most recent spring. In the data that I summarized for everyone, I have every 12th grade student, regardless of what school they're going to. So that's the summary that we have in the data. And then the other piece that we wanted to do like more in person was having 2 of our high school principals come and share a little bit more about how they're using the information and making their theories of actions and next steps as we move forward. Are there any questions on the overall data itself, or do you want to move right into them speaking about just a little bit more information about what it looks like at the high school?
I have just maybe a more overarching question. And Mrs. Landish and I had a little bit of this conversation back in June about, and this may be more for the principals too, is what we're looking at approaching an upper limit? Is the goal a realistic goal based on the data that we're seeing? So there's trying to turn off my statistics brain here, but there's probably a lot of noise in this data. So it would be hard to say that there's a difference between a 58% in the spring of 22 for the class of 23 and a 61% in the spring of 23 for the class of 26. Like, we don't know, and I don't know if anybody's done that analysis, but is that a statistically significant difference, or are we just looking at numbers with a class? It's hard to move those numbers based on how the GPAs are calculated. So is that 80% goal even a realistic goal, and or not? So then maybe that's just a big question that we can lean into, based on the work that you guys are doing. But there's not enough in the data for me to say that it's changing. I don't know.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's a great question, and we can definitely talk about that. So, the data from each of our schools is a little bit different, and our theory of actions are very similar and very aligned, which is work we've done, and we're proud to be here to present. And our focus on GPAs has really been a tangible thing that we can do. So through our theory of action, and we'll get to the 80% goal, so I'll kind of go through this, and I think we can talk more openly about that. The work around our TOA is what drives us in everything that we do. And if you can just take a look at South's theory of action as well as ours, there's some similarities but some differences based on the individual schools. The similarities are the GPA measurement and that KPI indicator that we're looking to achieve. South is focused on a 2.0 to 2.79 GPA as measured by the term. So we really try to look at our term and the things that we are doing. So the students who we have in each of those grade levels for half of a year is really our focus in that. West looks at a 2.4 to 2.79. So our focus is on students in that range. Students in that range are on the cusp of moving forward, right? And our Tier 1 instructional practices at the teacher level is what, as we continue to improve and professional develop and put things in place for our teachers to plan better, to teach better, to meet kids and engage them better, those are the groups of students who want to see move through that Tier 1 instructional improvement and acceleration. It doesn't mean that students who are not in that range aren't benefiting from the Tier 1 instructional practice, but oftentimes they have additional supports that are going to help them move forward towards that 2.8 GPA. So that's a realistic goal for us to focus on the students in those groups. And those are lag measures. So those are measures that happen at a semester. We do take a look at it at the progress. We do take a look at it at quarter as well, but grades are most accurate at each semester. And those lag measures, how do you know it's working along the way, especially with our Tier 1 instruction? And so that's where I'm going to turn it over to Maria next, and she's going to talk about what we are doing to meet that KPI indicator at the Tier 1 level, which is the lead measure, right? That lag measure is an outcome that we expect, that we want to have. That lead measure is data that can be controlled by the individual doing it on a day-to-day basis, so by our teaching staff, by administration. So she's going to talk about the things we're doing for that lead measure to try to move towards that 2.8 KPI indicator, 80% of our students reaching that.
So I do think that's a really good question, Dr. Piasek, and I think it depends on the school that you're looking at and the data that you're looking at. Some steps that we're taking towards our theory of action is, as Ryan said, we're really trying to have sound, strong Tier 1 instruction that are aligned to gradual release of responsibility, using WIC-CORE strategies to help students engage in that learning. We're aligning our goals, all of our goals, so we're all moving in the right direction. So each teacher has to create what's called a student learning objective and a professional practice goal. And so those goals are going to align to this KPI indicator of the 2.8 GPA. As Ryan had mentioned before, I think it's important to note that teachers can connect to this very directly. Every teacher in the classroom has influence and impact on a GPA, whereas sometimes, it's hard to say that with an ACT score, say, for example. We are going to use the continuous improvement process using student data through our professional learning communities. So as Ryan had said before, we're going to provide teachers with the data dashboard that's going to give them students that are falling in that theory of action range. So for South, it's 2.0 to 2.79. And they're going to employ a strategy, and they're going to continue to analyze that student work and see, is our strategies working, are they not working, and what do we need to adjust to make them more effective? And those are really, really important conversations. Teachers are given 1 hour throughout the school, the week, to have common planning time so that they can start having these discussions as a team. We're going to have a lot of professional development to help support that Tier 1 instruction. We are using a lot of coaching of teams. So we have lead teachers, our PLCs, grade level teams, a lot of coaching of those teams to help move in the right direction. And then we are really trying to strategically use our just-in-time support to support students that might fall below that range, but additionally, while giving students that are above that range some extra support or ownership in their learning as well.
So I think to get back to answering the realistic goal of 80% for all of our students being at a 2.8 GPA, I can tell you that at West High School, first semester, we had 85% of our student population above a 2.8 GPA. However, second semester, that fell to about 78%. Good conversations around why that happened, what happened, and what is the reason for that. So that is us at West High School, and do I think it's realistic for West High School students, 80% of them, to reach a 2.8 GPA or higher? Yes, I do. And so that is the work that we are doing. I can't speak for the other schools and their data. I can only speak for my data, and I'll turn it over to Maria.
Yeah, so in looking at it, it would depend on the class that you're looking at. We are in probably the 60% range, so we have some work to do. Again, that said, every teacher can connect to a GPA, and moving students in the range of 2.0 to 2.79 is a viable move. When you start looking at the really high GPAs, to move it, especially as you creep into your junior and senior years, it's really hard to move that GPA. So we really want to focus on a target group that we know we can move, in hopes that then that will bring up the entire student body.
So, Ms. Skennerman, the data that you shared with us is cumulative GPA. So when we're looking at class of 23, those are the needles that are harder to move than class of 26 that has 2 semesters under their belt.
Correct. I was going to come back and point that out. Ryan did point that out, but I wanted to just say that again, that the overall KPI is a cumulative GPA, where with a high school team, they felt that obviously, like they've said, the teachers have more direct interaction with students on a term level. And so we've established our data system, YSDASH-Local, to report not only cum, but also term, so that they're able to make actionable steps, and we're still able to address the KPI. So we're kind of using them both together, but we have separated them and clarified our terminology, because that was a little bit of work. And I can't tell you how many places in Infinite Campus that the GPA is and tied to. It's amazing how many places it is. So that was like our first piece of work, to just even clarify our language and data.
My other question about the data is whether it's straight unweighted or weighted GPAs.
I believe, I'd have to double check, but I believe it is the weighted one.
It should be. I mean, that's what we are going by, so that's our expectation, that it's weighted.
I would agree. Yeah.
That was a piece of the Infinite Campus. There's a weighted box, there's a not weighted.
Yeah.
There's so many options, so.
Other questions? Mark?
Yeah, I had the same concern that you did, Dr. Piasek, when I first saw this as far as realistic, and I'm just wondering, maybe this is a KPI question in general. Do they tend to be more, shall I say, outcome-based versus growth-based? Because I'm wondering if a better, KPI might be something like a, 5% improvement each year until 80% of students are at 2.8. Something realistic that's showing progress. But yeah, I mean, class 2023, there's no way you're going to jump 20% when it's cumulative versus 2026 having at least maybe some chance at it, but even that. So any thoughts on that, I guess?
And I'm just going to add to that because the class of 26, these are this year's freshmen, and most of them would have maybe had access to one AP class. So more than likely, what we see in 26 is not the same representation, not just the quantity of classes, but the access to classes. And I know, we celebrate a large percentage of our students actually taking at least one AP class, which is part of the AVID expectations too. So that's even a little bit skewed, I think, because that probably is the group that has the higher potential to increase just as a result of what courses become available to them over time. So.
I do wonder, and maybe you guys have talked about this is kind of prior to me joining the team, as you establish the KPIs, they are for 3 years. So do we have something in place in case we need some revisions for this one or something else? Maybe that's something we can talk about outside the meeting or even tonight, what our process is with the KPIs if we want to make adjustments.
Yeah, to Ms. Gunnerman's point, I mean, we did set them for 3-year targets. So, but to Mr. Borowski's point, I mean, like the class of 2023, we're probably not going to get there, right? So I think that's maybe a conversation we need to have if that's something that we think we want to vary from that 3-year target and we want to have more growth-based concepts that we can measure year by year. Ultimately, the thought was we would kind of measure it over the years via the dashboards that we're developing for the website, and then we'd be able to see the progress. So I think it's a good conversation to have ultimately, and whatever the board would like, we can adjust to.
I mean, my reaction to this is whether or not we have the right goal, I think we have great strategies for helping our students advance who have the potential to advance. And when we set this KPI, like some of our others, it's the first time we've created KPIs for the district. I think just having some directional arrows that can help us move in the right direction. The question of GPA versus ACT versus, there's so many ways that we measure, I think, and what we heard from our Hadfield leadership team too, like it's not just about the absolute number, but there's a lot of success stories behind those numbers. So I don't necessarily think we need to be fiddling with the goal, but I think the more we talk about this, the more we understand kind of what's behind it and what's the difference between our freshmen and our seniors and then what's possible and all that. Because I very much respect what you're both saying about the different strategies that you're taking because you have different student bodies. But, sometimes it's unfair to have unattainable goals. But having a goal that's outside of the box that we're in right now, I think we might not meet it, but that's not the reason for the KPIs is to hit all the goals and then just relax and say that we're done. I think we'll only know 3 years from now what's the progress that we could potentially make toward this goal, and then we can kind of recalibrate. That's my initial reaction. Because I just, my data brain is telling me that there's more in the numbers than we're actually seeing in this representation that probably would indicate there's been some great progress. Our seniors next year, their freshman year was 2021, which was a little, or 2020, which was a little messy. So,
Yeah, I would agree that, similar to what you heard from the elementary principals, there's celebrations of kids who have taken the journey, had a low GPA as a freshman, and have continued to improve each semester, right, in different ways. But that cumulative GPA is an average over time. So a lot of celebrations of what kids are doing and what is happening in the classroom to move kids along, they do exist. I think the goals are realistic. We, just like the elementary principals, have other goals that we have talked about, right? You're seeing the end result, but we also have certain groups of students that Maria talked about. We have the same, that we have 5% increase, 8% increase, then the overall will get us to our 80% or get us on that way there. So those conversations are happening. The overall goal does prompt us to keep data on that and move in that direction, and that's what we have been doing. So.
Mr. Zenobia.
Thank you for this. Seeing this data, my view of the KPI is it's going to raise the expectation for freshmen. And so the real value, if any, that we'll see will be in those classes, and any incoming classes will have the expectation. It's hard to meet any goal if no one is going to hold you to it. And if our teachers in our high schools begin to do that and have higher expectations, not that they weren't there before, but if we have a very specific goal to say, hey, we really do expect you to be here in 4 years, I do think that will move the needle. I certainly hope it will. As far as the couple of years that we're looking at now, it's tough. And again, you're talking about the seniors that had 2021 as their school year. So I think it's great. So good job, and thank you.
Thanks.
Actually, you bring up a good point, and the question that I just realized listening to you, Mr. Zenobia. So how are these KPIs communicated to students, if at all? And, how much feedback are they getting on where the class is at? I mean, you can't really attain a goal unless they know about it and unless there's some, I guess, sort of team effort or team rally towards it, so they feel some buy-in. If you could just speak to that, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, I'll speak to something, it was very small that we did at South that had just a huge success. So last year, we celebrated students on the honor roll with the certificate. Again, just to share, these are the students that have earned this high GPA. This is what they earn when they get the GPA. Those certificates were viewed more times on social media from more people. I received emails from parents just thanking us for the honor and recognition. And again, I know that's really small, but that's one way of us sharing this through homeroom. Each and every single week, we have students checking their grades, their GPA, so they know where they stand, and then they're making a plan to hopefully increase that GPA every single week. So we're really trying to continually come around to this goal every single week in homeroom to set up a plan for those just-in-time days and be really strategic with that time. So those are two really small things that we've done to share with the students, like, this is our goal, this is where we want you to be, and this is what you earn when you get there.
We also have similar ways that we celebrate students. I think for that leg measure for 2.8 GPA, right, it happens at the end of time, but what's happening in the classroom every day, and Mr. Zenobia talked about, is the expectations of our teaching staff and what they're doing every day for kids in their instructional delivery. So what is their goal for the day? What are their standards that the students have to meet? And their relentless pursuit of students meeting those goals and standards, because they are high academic standards, the curriculum that we are putting into place, the learning targets and the UBDs and everything that exists, have kids learning at high levels. So our teachers are setting the tone to have students accomplish that every day. And that is kind of the work that we talked about, right? That 2.8 GPA, yes, we celebrate that. It's a goal for students, but it's also every day that high expectation through good instructional practice, through teachers meeting and PLCing, sharing instructional practice, talking about students who fall within that 2.8 to 2.5 GPA and what's working well, or how can we do a strategy differently to engage them to meet that standard. that is the day-to-day that we're heavily focused on as well. So the goal is daily, but we celebrate that in bigger ways similarly as well, her and I, so.
So just to clarify, are you saying that other than just increasing your GPA in general, and, and celebrating that, there's specific talk about students getting to 2.8 or above?
I wouldn't say that teachers are talking about a 2.8 GPA. And I think the reason for that is we have students who that's above that, and we have other students who would look at that and feel it's impossible, right? So the standard in talking about confidence of our students, right? How are our teachers engaging our students every day to gain academic confidence, to move steps closer to achieving it. So our SLO and PPGs that are aligned to this will have teachers focusing on their internal standards, right? Focusing on a specific learning target, focused around literacy, and keeping data on students and how they're doing, and then looking to improve that data right through change in instructional practice. And that data is meant towards proficiency, which is a 2.8 GPA. So it's not explicitly talked about as a 2.8 GPA goal, but it's implicitly what we do and how everything we do leads to our teachers doing that every day in the classroom.
I would echo what Ryan said. I guess the only thing I would add is, like, we're talking about a goal of increasing your GPA. So setting goals and making those goals attainable. So in homeroom, we're coming back to that every single week, and trying to create plans around how we increase that. So I would agree in that, when you set the 2.8 bar, sometimes you lose people on the fringe, and we don't want to do that. So that's intentional.
And I think there's an important clarification with the KPIs that are organizational goals, that aren't individual student goals. Like each student is going to have their own personal learning goals and objectives, but it's really an average, which, I just struggle with averages in general because they have all kinds of standard deviations and things that really don't tell us what the actual answer is, but we have to have something. So whether it's a mean or a median or a mode or whatever it is. But I don't think we want to get lost in the 2.8 is something that is an individual objective for a student, because it wouldn't be fair on either end.
Right, and there's so many KPIs, and plus the students might not even care what the district KPI is either.
I hope that they don't care what the district KPI is, right? That's for us to care about, but not for them.
Right, so I realize that for sure.
Mrs. Koenig.
I just want to make a comment. I know this is a lot of work and a big undertaking that you guys have done across the district, in the high schools. But what I especially appreciate being a former teacher is I can feel that you're making this a priority, where you're bringing it into homeroom. You're giving teachers an hour to collaborate every week. Those are the kind of things that teachers need to feel that sense of community, that sense of we're in this together. And that's what's going to make the difference, because it's easy to mandate. It's easy to say, well, we're going to do this, and everybody, you just figure it out. But you guys are giving them the tools as well, to be able to do that sense of collaboration and time, which is precious. They're not going home trying to figure this out on their own, but they're working collaboratively. So, I'm really excited to hear that. That's going to make the difference.
All right, anything else?
I would just say that I really just appreciate you guys being here. Earlier last spring, Tom and the North team were here, so it's nice just to hear how things are looking at each school. So it's just much appreciated, and we can tell our middle school friends and elementary friends that they'll be joining us.
Nice.
Well, thank you for arriving early and staying late. This was as long a meeting for you as it was for us, so thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, are there any recommendations for future meetings, discussion topics? All right, seeing none, with that, our next committee meeting is Tuesday, September 5th at 7 p.m. here in the boardroom. I'm looking at Dr. Siebert just to make sure I got the date right.
Yes, it's the
Tuesday,
first day of
September 5th.
school.
That's right, the first day of school, so we'll have a lot to celebrate. And then we will be here again tomorrow night at 6:15 for the Human Resources Committee and at 7 PM for the August full board meeting. So thank you, everyone, for your stamina this week. We'll see you tomorrow. Good night.